1940. As the daylight skies cleared following the Battle of Britain, the conflict tragically migrated to the nocturnal realm with the devastating night blitz. This shift was dictated by a technological vulnerability in Britain's defenses. The magnificent chain-home radar system, the nation's electronic shield, suffered a fatal geographical flaw rooted in physics: the curvature of the Earth and the chaotic phenomenon of sea clutter. These factors combined to create a low-lying radar shadow, a massive, unmonitored void extending for miles over the crucial Thames Estuary. This was the precise corridor the Luftwaffe exploited. German bombing units, utilizing fast, nimble aircraft like the Heinkel He-111 and Junkers Ju-88, perfected sea-skimming tactic. By flying barely 50 feet above the water, they effectively neutralized coastal radar, slipping beneath the electronic curtain to execute unannounced, critical strike. Their primary, paralyzing objective was the deployment of advanced magnetic and acoustic mines directly into the estuary's critical shipping lanes, systematically strangling the flow of imports and supplies into the port of London. This was economic warfare by naval blockade, executed from the air. Furthermore, these unmolested approaches facilitated devastatingly accurate night raids on vulnerable coastal oil reserves and vital infrastructure. The Admiralty, facing the imminent suffocation of the capital, recognized that the fixed, land-based anti-aircraft defenses were structurally and geographically impotent. A desperate, immediate call was issued for an engineered solution that could project Britain's defensive and electronic might directly onto the sea itself, forcing the enemy to either face direct, terminal fire or completely abandon their low-level terror tactic. The solution had to be massive, immobile, and capable of operating autonomously in the hostile, unpredictable environment of the outer North Sea. The seemingly insurmountable challenge of constructing resilient military platforms on the shifting, submerged sands of the estuary was brilliantly resolved by Guy Maunsell, a highly specialized civil engineer with a genius for unconventional, heavy marine structures. His radical proposal was a logistical masterstroke: circumvent the difficulty of offshore construction entirely by performing massive prefabrication on land, and subsequently move the fully equipped, multi-thousand-ton structures to their target locations. This audacious, engineering-first strategy received immediate, high-level approval, initiating one of the most secretive and resource-intensive civil engineering projects of the war. Construction was rapidly divided into two distinct, mission-specific classes of floating fortress. The naval forts, Admiralty forts, were designed as monolithic, heavily armored sentinels for deep water channels. Each colossal unit comprised a massive, hollow concrete pontoon base and two imposing, reinforced concrete support legs, capped by a single, integral, armored steel superstructure. They were built for self-sufficiency and armed to engage both surface vessels and low-flying aircraft. In contrast, the Army forts, War Office forts, were conceived as decentralized, collective defense complexes. They consisted of 7 interlinked, slender steel towers, arranged in a precise defensive ring. 6 of these towers were dedicated gun emplacements and crew quarters, while the 7th, crucial central tower was entirely dedicated to command, fire control, and the sensitive radar equipment. The construction process, utilizing vast quantities of concrete and steel, was executed with obsessive speed and military secrecy within the secured, drained dry docks of the Thames shipyards, often under severe rationing constraints and the constant pressure of a war demanding immediate results. The deployment phase of the Maunsell Forts represented the most critical and physically precarious stage of the entire project. Once the immense structures were completed within their basins, the dry dock gates were deliberately opened, allowing the basins to flood. The colossal, heavy pontoon hull, now an awkward, unstable barge, was carefully maneuvered into the open water. This movement required the precise, coordinated efforts of powerful ocean-going tugs. The slow, arduous tow across the open sea was a logistical and operational nightmare, complicated by volatile weather, strong currents, and the ever-present, real risk of detection by enemy reconnaissance or submarine patrols. To minimize risk, the entire operation was conducted under the deepest cover, often utilizing the absolute darkness of night or the shrouding effect of coastal fog, and precisely timed to coincide with favorable high tide cycles. Upon arrival at the predetermined, hydrographically verified coordinates, the final, terrifying procedure began. Water ballast valves, built deep into the pontoon base, were opened. Slowly, deliberately, and with an agonizing finality, the structure began its controlled descent, the huge concrete legs plunging into the cold, choppy waters of the North Sea. This moment of intentional submersion was the irreversible act of commitment. Once the concrete pontoon settled firmly into the seabed, the fort was fixed forever. The initial military crews, already confined within the superstructure during the tow, had witnessed the definitive end of their connection to the mainland, permanently committing themselves and their steel island to the lonely, dangerous front line of Britain's defense. Once permanently anchored, the Maunsell Forts instantly imposed a unique, severe psychological test on their garrisons. Life aboard was characterized by profound isolation, an aggressive noise profile, and a relentless physical discomfort. On the larger army forts, garrisons frequently exceeded 120 men, a complex mix of specialized personnel including gunners, radar technicians, engine fitters, and signalmen, all crammed into the minimal space afforded by the steel superstructures. Privacy was a non-existent luxury. Men lived in constant, intense proximity, sharing cramped bunks and facilities. The environment was an unrelenting assault on the senses. The ceaseless shriek of the wind whipping around the struts, the rhythmic, disorienting motion of the structure during severe gales, and the perpetual, loud throbbing of the powerful diesel generators, which had to run without interruption to power the crucial radar and fire control systems. The psychological toll was extreme. Cut off completely from the shore, the only escape was by authorized transfer, and the realization that any catastrophic damage meant almost certain death amplified the strain. The military solution was iron discipline, with the commanding officer maintaining absolute, autonomous authority. This shared, high-stakes existence, however, fostered an intense, professional reliance among the crew, a small, highly specialized society that mastered coping with relentless routine punctuated by moments of extreme, adrenaline-fueled combat. The true strategic brilliance and wartime effectiveness of the Maunsell Forts lay not merely in their heavy artillery, but in their sophisticated electronic function as advanced radar pickets. They were specifically designed to eliminate the critical radar shadow that plagued the mainland's chain-home network. The central command tower of the Army forts housed the latest, highly sensitive chain-home low (CHL) radar units, specially tuned to counter sea clutter and optimized for detecting targets at low altitude. Positioned 60 feet or more above the waves, these systems could effectively see over the horizon and detect low-flying intruders with a clarity that was geographically impossible for coastal stations. Functionally, the forts acted as vital forward interception vectors. Radar operators maintained ceaseless vigilance, feeding immediate, precise tracking data on inbound raids directly back to the mainland's fighter command control network via secure, dedicated radio link. This seamless data integration was revolutionary. It allowed ground controllers to vector high-performance RAF night fighters, the twin-engined Bristol Beaufighters and the formidable de Havilland Mosquitoes, onto specific interception courses while the German bombers were still dozens of miles offshore. This preemptive capability shattered the Luftwaffe's night doctrine. The element of surprise was conclusively neutralized, forcing the enemy into a deadly air-to-air fight long before they could reach the coast. The Maunsell Forts guaranteed that no enemy aircraft could slip silently past the electronic threshold of the Thames. The summer of 1944 brought with it a new, terrifying and relentless chapter in aerial warfare. The arrival of Hitler's dreaded vengeance weapons, the V-1 flying bombs. These pilotless, pulse-jet-powered missiles, chillingly dubbed doodlebugs by the British populace, presented an unprecedented defensive conundrum. Traveling at speeds approaching 400 miles per hour and maintaining a relatively stable, low altitude of around 2,000 feet, they proved exceptionally difficult targets. Traditional fighter aircraft struggled to intercept them effectively, particularly at night, and many mainland anti-aircraft batteries found it challenging to accurately track and engage such fast-moving, low-flying objects with sufficient lead time. However, the unique, forward positioning and robust engineering of the Maunsell Forts rendered them a critical, almost perfectly suited defense against this novel terror. Situated strategically in the outermost kill zone over the open sea, the fort's heavy anti-aircraft guns possessed a clear, unobstructed firing arc, perfectly aligned with the predictable, straight-line trajectory of the incoming V-1s. The fort crews, already hardened by years of intense night combat, rapidly adapted their tactics and refined their skills. They were equipped with advanced, radar-controlled predictive fire control systems, which, combined with their unparalleled line of sight over the water, allowed the powerful 3.7-inch guns to achieve astonishing levels of accuracy against these buzz bombs. The battle against each V-1 became a desperate, high-stakes duel against the clock. From the moment the missile's distinctive, sputtering pulse jet engine abruptly cut out, a chilling silence indicating the bomb was about to dive, the fort had mere seconds to register the trajectory, calculate the lead, and neutralize the threat before its devastating impact on the mainland. Through an extraordinary display of courage, technical precision, and relentless, grueling training, the Maunsell Forts were directly credited with destroying hundreds of V-1s, ensuring that countless of these devastating weapons exploded harmlessly over the open sea, rather than inflicting chaos, death, and destruction within London's densely populated civilian districts. Their unwavering stand saved innumerable lives and preserved vital infrastructure during one of the most psychologically draining periods of the war. The strategic positioning of the Maunsell Forts, while militarily advantageous, came at an exceptionally severe human and logistical cost. Supplying these isolated outposts with every conceivable necessity, from thousands of anti-aircraft shells and tons of diesel fuel for the generators, to potable water, fresh food, and essential medical provisions, was a continuous, high-stakes battle waged against the unpredictable and often ferocious North Sea itself. The arduous task of resupply fell primarily to small, highly specialized naval pinnaces and motor launches, whose experienced crews were specifically trained to navigate the treacherous, constantly shifting sandbars and shallow waters of the estuary. Every single resupply mission was an ordeal fraught with inherent peril. Mooring to the colossal, barnacle-encrusted concrete legs of the forts was a precise, high-risk maneuver, feasible only in periods of exceptionally calm waters. Even a moderate swell could cause the comparatively tiny supply vessels to pitch violently, risking being smashed and capsized against the unyielding, unmoving steel and concrete supports of the fortress. Crucial supplies, including fresh produce, morale-boosting mail from home, and the vital rotation of exhausted personnel, often had to be painstakingly winched up the sheer, slick sides of the fortress using a cumbersome crane system, a slow, manually intensive, and inherently dangerous task, made infinitely worse by the constant threat of distant German reconnaissance aircraft. During the notorious, gale-force winter months, thick fog banks or relentless, storm-force winds could completely sever the fort's physical connection to the mainland for weeks on end. Crews learned to exist under strict rationing, meticulously conserving every drop of fresh water and subsisting largely on tinned goods, their very survival and sanity dictated by the unpredictable caprices of meteorological reports. The profound isolation, the ever-present danger, and the relentless deprivation took a heavy and insidious toll on both morale and long-term health. With the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany in 1945, the Maunsell Forts had, without doubt, fulfilled their extraordinary wartime purpose with quiet, yet undeniable distinction. Their heroism in defending the Thames Estuary and blunting the V-1 onslaught was a crucial, if often understated, contribution to the ultimate Allied victory. However, the rapidly shifting priorities of peacetime swiftly relegated these formidable structures to obsolescence. The immense financial and logistical burden of maintaining these aging, highly specialized, and structurally unique fortresses in a peacetime environment was deemed militarily and economically unsustainable. The British government therefore issued an immediate directive for their complete decommissioning. All formidable armaments, the powerful 3.7-inch anti-aircraft guns, the rapid-firing Bofors cannons, were painstakingly removed. The sophisticated radar antennae were systematically dismantled, and the long-serving garrisons, having endured years of profound isolation and peril, were hastily evacuated, returning to a homeland that was only just beginning to heal. The immense steel and concrete hulks were left to their fate, abandoned to the relentless, corrosive forces of the North Sea wind and salt spray. They stood as stark, silent, and forgotten monuments to a brutal era, rusting ominously on their stilts, their official military life definitively over. However, a peculiar and crucial legal ambiguity would soon breathe an entirely new, unexpected, and often chaotic life into these derelict structures. Many of the forts, particularly the naval forts such as Ruff's Tower, sat precariously just outside the recognized 3-mile limit of British territorial waters at the time of their abandonment. This created an intriguing legal vacuum, a terra nullius, nobody's land, that would unexpectedly become the vibrant stage for a very different kind of revolution, far removed from the solemnity of global warfare. The post-war landscape of Britain, particularly in the financially austere 1950s and culturally conservative early 1960s, was characterized by a severe lack of independent media and broadcasting choice. The airwaves were a tightly controlled monopoly of the state-run British Broadcasting Corporation (BBC), which offered a limited, often staid, and culturally conservative programming fare. Crucially, the BBC largely ignored the burgeoning, vibrant popular music scenes of rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and pop music that were captivating the nation's youth. This significant cultural void created a colossal demand, which a new generation of entrepreneurial and rebellious spirits quickly recognized could be met from an unexpected source: the sea. The derelict Maunsell Forts, standing abandoned in what was effectively international waters, presented a tantalizingly perfect solution. They were ready-made, high-altitude platforms beyond the immediate reach of strict British broadcasting regulations. This audacious realization sparked the golden age of pirate radio. Visionary figures, often charismatic former DJs, engineers, and media moguls, rapidly moved to occupy forts like Red Sands, Shivering Sands, and Knock John. They underwent a dramatic metamorphosis, transformed from war machines into vibrant, makeshift, yet highly effective, broadcasting studios. From these isolated bastions of rebellion, powerful transmitters and towering antennae blasted forth rock and roll, pop anthems, and countercultural programming to millions of eager, disenfranchised listeners on the mainland. This bold, technologically savvy invasion of the forts not only captivated a nation and created iconic cultural symbols but also fundamentally reshaped the British media landscape, ultimately forcing the government to address the overwhelming public demand for commercial radio. The most unique, enduring, and undeniably eccentric legacy of the Maunsell Forts belongs exclusively to Ruff's Tower, one of the naval forts. In 1967, a former British Army major, the indomitable and fiercely individualistic Paddy Roy Bates, executed a daring occupation of Ruff's Tower. Drawing upon a clever, though perpetually contested, interpretation of maritime and international law, specifically, that the structure was unoccupied and existed in international waters at the precise moment of his claim, Bates boldly declared the fort the independent, sovereign principality of Sealand. What began as an audacious pirate radio venture, attempting to sidestep broadcasting laws, swiftly escalated into a full-blown, albeit micro, declaration of statehood. Sealand's subsequent history reads like an improbable adventure novel, complete with internal coups, most famously in 1978, the issuance of its own unique passports, currency, and postage stamps, and even dramatic armed skirmishes with the Royal Navy and international mercenaries attempting to usurp Bates's control. Bates's persistent, defiant assertion of independence, though largely unrecognized by established nations, cemented Ruff's Tower's place not just in British folklore, but in global eccentricity and the annals of micronationalism. Today, the surviving Maunsell Forts, slowly yielding to the relentless, corrosive power of the North Sea, are universally revered as unique and irreplaceable historical monuments. They stand not only as a profound testament to the engineering audacity and sheer courage required to defend a nation against an existential threat during World War II, but also as a vibrant, multi-layered cultural monument to human ingenuity, the enduring spirit of independence, and the remarkable capacity for repurposing. Even the most formidable instruments of war can be transformed into unexpected symbols of freedom, defiance, and a very particular brand of British eccentricity.